Welcome to BookHuddle. I'm your host, Karen Reader with Readgab. Today, our guest is Bobbie Pyron, and I am just excited about this book, but it's a deep one, right? It's got some heavy topics. So before we get into all of these heavy topics about Octopus Moon, I want to take a minute and have Bobbie, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, just in addition, something separate from being an author?
Sure, and thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm delighted to be here. So I'm Bobbie Pyron, and Octopus Moon is my eighth book. I live in the mountains of Western North Carolina, about 20 minutes north of Asheville. And when I'm not sitting at my computer writing, I love to hike. My husband and I have hiked many, many, many sections of the Appalachian Trail. So we do that. I have two wonderful dogs, Piper and Barney, and so they make sure I don't spend too much time at my computer gazing
Nice.
at at the screen.
Oh, perfect. Oh, I love to hike too. So much beauty out there, and it's so green out there. I love it.
Oh, yes, it is. And the dogwoods are blooming. Yay.
Yes. Oh, that's fantastic. So I love to do an author icebreaker. So we're going to do the book Inkheart. And in this book, the characters are transported to another book in within this world. And so if you could think about a book that you would just either absolutely love to experience living in, or one that you could even tell us one that you're like, no, I would never want to go to that book.
Well, first of all, I loved Inkheart. I think, if you had asked me this question when I was 9 or 10, I would have said Pippi Longstocking
Oh,
because
fun.
I loved the Pippi Longstocking books. I just thought, living on a pirate boat with a horse and monkeys and all that would be so awesome. But, now I just reread one of my favorite books from high school called The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. And it's fantasy. And I was astonished all over again by how beautiful a book it is. It's about a unicorn who doesn't realize she's the last unicorn in the world. And she goes out looking for other unicorns. And it's just full of possibilities and beauty. And it would be a great place to be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. To encounter that last unicorn and just have those kind of conversations and
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic. I love it. All right, so your book, Octopus Moon, can you give those listening who have never heard of this yet? Can you tell us what it is about?
Sure. So Octopus Moon is a middle grade novel in verse. So it's written in free verse. And it follows the journey of 10-year-old Pearl. And, for most of her life, she has had moments or periods where the dark cloud kind of takes over her life, as she calls it. In other words, is depression. And she also has a fair amount of anxiety, but she's always had her own coping mechanisms to deal with it. Running, she loves to run and skateboard with her best friend Rosie and hang out with her friends and take her beloved beagle Tuck for long walks. And all those things have helped keep the depression at bay. But there's all these changes right before fifth grade. And all of a sudden, she is finding as she enters fifth grade that those coping mechanisms are no longer working for her. And she becomes uh, almost incapacitated at a
Yeah.
certain point by her depression. And so it's her journey from crippling depression to understanding and hope. It's a
Yeah.
very hopeful book.
Yes, for sure. And I like that she goes through discovering what it even is and other people's
Yes.
reactions to it. It is so powerful, but it's heavy. It's a topic that it's to approach it. What made you want to take this on, Bobby?
Well, Pearl is very much and in many ways is based on me as a child. I struggled with depression from the time that I was probably about 5 years old. But I mean, I'm older than dirt. So this was back in the early 60s. And people had no idea that children could experience depression or really any kind of mental illness. And there weren't therapists, and you didn't talk about mental illness
Right?
at
Not even for
all.
adults at that
Not
point,
even
right?
for adults.
Yeah.
Yeah, not even for, it was just, you didn't talk about it. So I know that depression and anxiety are a huge issue for kids now. And I think, they always have been, but I think even more since the pandemic. So I wanted to write a book that would serve as a mirror and a window and a glass sliding door, which I just learned about, into the world of what it's like for someone who lives with this particular insidious mental illness.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important for kids to be able to see it in themselves or in other people. Like, I think
Yeah,
that is one of the most beautiful things about children's literature, literature in general, but children's literature for kids to start to have empathy for other people, to understand what it is like for someone
exactly.
else.
And I
Even,
mean,
yeah,
I was a passionate reader as a kid, and there weren't any books out there that I saw my inner reality reflected in. A book like this would have been tremendous for me. If nothing else, I would have felt seen and felt less alone. But it would also have helped me to understand what depression is. I can remember, my mother, always saying, "Oh, Bobbie's just moody, or Bobbie's overly sensitive, or it's a phase she's going through." And to help people understand that it's not those things,
right,
but at the same time, it's not anything to be ashamed of. There's a
right.
lot of guilt and shame associated with mental illness.
Yes, even still, right, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And and to see it as, and I think it is so hard to find that balance, to find a balance where people are comfortable with talking about it and to find a way to help people who identify with it to feel understood and
Right.
accepted, right? And to have a book like this just in the classroom on the shelf that it's like, yeah, that's just something just like this kid next to me has asthma. It's just something that
Yep.
somebody has.
Yep.
I like that comparison in there too. So are your any other books that you've done? Are they in verse?
So my book Stay, which
Okay.
explores the issues around homelessness, the dogs chapters is written from the perspective of a dog and also the perspective of a child,
Okay.
an 11-year-old. And the dogs chapters are written in free verse, and
Oh,
they
how
were
fun.
so much fun to write. And I love novels in verse. I thought, oh, I'm going to write a whole novel in verse. It'll be great.
And was it everything you hoped it would be doing one in verse?
Oh, it was so hard. I mean, I learned a lot. I learned a lot, but it was so counterintuitive for the way that I normally write a first draft of a book. And so it was definitely hard. I told my agent, if I ever say I'm going to write another novel in verse, just shoot me
Just
because
tell me no. I do not accept.
oh.
Rejected right there. I'm not going to help put it out in the world just to deter you, right?
Yeah, but I think it was a good way to handle such a heavy topic.
I thought so. I thought so because for me, part of it was, especially being a mother for me, but just reading it's sometimes hard to read some of these topics,
Mm.
but when you can go so quickly down the page and just get lost in the flow and the language, it helps to have this verse instead of just I don't know, freeful. I don't know. What am I
Yeah.
trying to say? I felt that yes, it helped it flow better for me rather than getting bogged down in what I was reading.
Right, right. And there were times when I was writing the first draft that I thought maybe I should just switch this over to prose, but
Right.
I just felt on an intuitive level that this was the way to do it.
Right. Yeah, it flowed so beautifully and yeah, I and there's so much emotion in there that I
Yeah.
feel like you feel the emotion in a way that how I said I didn't want to get bogged down in the emotion. I do also feel like I felt the emotion on a higher level because of it.
Yeah, and I think part of that, I know you're doing preschool, so you're very familiar with picture books.
Yes.
And picture books, I'm so in awe of my fellow writers who are picture book authors because every word has to carry its own weight. Every
Yeah, they all
every
have to
word
count.
has a job. You
Yes.
know, and I tend to ramble even in my writing, but writing in verse really forced me to look at each word and make sure that it was the right word and that it needed to be there, whether or not
Yes.
it needed to be there.
I bet that helped you as a writer as well when you go back to the prose, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
just the value of everything that's included, that there's a reason for it.
Yeah, it definitely does. I'm working on another book right now that's in very early stages, but I find myself it's not written in verse, it's written in prose, but I find myself almost thinking in verse.
Nice.
Yeah, the rhythm is different and thinking about each word in a different way than I think I would have in the past.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Maybe every author should, that should be a part of preparing to be an author is having to do at least a little short story in verse to prepare your mind
Yeah.
to really make things count.
Well, I think, we need to, all of us, no matter what we do, we need to go outside our comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah, that can help you grow and even strengthen what you are good at.
Yes, yes.
Sure. Love it, love it. All right, so we've got this big ocean theme. Starts out with the turtles, later goes on to the octopus, but she just loves the ocean. She's around the aquarium. Did you start out with that when you knew you were going to write this book about depression? Did you know it was the ocean theme and why the ocean theme?
I knew I wanted to set it in a fictional town on the Gulf of Mexico in Florida because that's where I grew up. And there still is in the town of Fort Walton Beach, there's the Gulfarium. And my mother was very good friends with the owner of the Gulfarium. And we could go there anytime we wanted and get in for free. And I spent a lot of time in the Gulfarium. It was much smaller than the one in Octopus Moon, but I absolutely loved it. And I love everything about the ocean and the beach and the turtles and all the things. And I wanted to be a mermaid. Uh,
Nice.
I grew up, that was very
My
much
profession.
based on me. Yeah, yeah. But also I think it's a metaphor. I kind of went a little crazy with metaphors in this book, but it's a bit of a metaphor for how depression, you don't ever, it's hard to see what's going on underneath a person who has depression, especially when we get older. We're great at hiding in our
Yes.
turtle shells. We're great
Yes.
at camouflaging ourselves to blend in like octopus do because we have to function in the world.
Right.
So it was very much a metaphor in that way.
Yes, that's beautiful. I love it. And it makes it consumable more for those who are reading it who aren't ready to just go read something that's pure text about depression, right? To have
Right.
those powerful
And
metaphors.
I think it's, hopefully relatable
Yeah.
to a lot of kids.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, animals do so much for literature that,
Yes.
especially for children, there's so much to relate to and to enjoy about the stories of animals. And see yourself in and these connections. So
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So, we talked a little bit about the verse. What was the
Mhm.
hardest part writing this story?
Well, I mean, certainly writing it in verse was very challenging. But the other thing that was difficult, my wonderful editor, Stacy Barney, kept every draft she would read, she would say, I want you to lean in more into
Okay.
the what it's like to struggle with depression. And I've spent 60 years trying to deal with depression, and so it was hard. That was very difficult for me. I have my coping mechanisms. I have my ways of dealing with depression, and so to lean into it further was very challenging. And there were times when I just didn't know if it was mentally healthy for me to do. But then I remembered a year ago, I was doing author visits at schools in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that at the end of the class visit, they always ask, well, when's your next book coming out? So I told them about Octopus Moon and what it was about. And afterwards, when all the other kids were gone, this boy came up to me and he said, Mrs. Pyron, I need your book, Octopus Moon. He said, I am depressed and I don't know why. And my parents don't think it's real. And he said, I can't wait for your book.
And it
And
sounds like his parents need the book.
yes, his parents need the book as well. And I just said, I wrote this book for you. So that made it all, I kept thinking about that young man when it was so hard and I didn't know if I could do it. And I said, you know what? That I've got to do this book. I've got to do it for him and other kids like him.
That's that's goosebumps and all everything all over. I just love that. I just need to take a minute and just feel. Oh my goodness. So can you share anything else about what was rewarding? You just shared a big one. Is there anything else you'd like to share about what was rewarding about writing this?
I think actually one of the really rewarding parts in terms of writing it was feeling like I was really getting a handle on Pearl because I had to get to a point where I cut myself loose. This
Okay.
is not about me as a child. This is Pearl's journey.
Right.
She is, somewhat like me, but she's her own person. And
Yes.
so that was very rewarding. It was very freeing when I was able to do that. And quite honestly, when I got to the end of the book, of course, I was glad to be done, but I was really pleased with how hopeful it was. It wasn't sugarcoating. It wasn't
Right.
saying, okay, this is your depression is over with, going forward, you're never going to have to deal with this again.
If only.
Right, right. But, the moon is always full,
Nice.
even if we can't see it. And that is that light that she has learned to hold on to.
Well, and I think this is so hard because especially Pearl's a little younger at age 10. She's 10
She's 10 going on 11.
and going
Yeah,
on 11. And so this is, I guess puberty is starting a lot earlier for kids more and more now. But often it's more the teenage years that you see the depression in,
right,
right? And then you spoke of even being 5 and dealing with depression. And
right.
could you share what I think it's so hard to find balance because sometimes I'll read online, don't be so quick to get your young children to therapy. Don't be so quick to, I don't know, there's so many things and so much balance. And then somebody who's emotional, it's okay to be emotional sometimes. And I know clearly you're not a psychiatrist or anything, but
Right.
from your own personal view and your writings to the adults out there listening, what would you say to how to approach a child to first steps to find out if there's anything about depression?
You know, I think the first thing is to be aware of what the red flags are. If you find that your child is their schoolwork has changed, their grades are going down or they're not getting their homework in. It was interesting to me when I was because I didn't go through therapy as a child. I
Right,
met with a child and family therapist down in Asheville to find out how it all works.
right, right,
And she said, still, most often it's the teachers who get in touch with the parents, send a note home or call them and say, something's going on
right,
with her. She's not focusing on her work. She's not turning her homework in, so often it's the teachers that see it. And then the other thing, changes in eating patterns, changes in sleep patterns. Are they sleeping too much? Are they, not sleeping? Are they tired all the time? Are they not, if they're normally like to hang out with their friends and all of a sudden they're staying in their room?
right.
Um, I think that because we are in such a hurry all the time, when kids are this age, usually there's siblings. And so you're putting out little fires all the time. And so it's easy just to say, oh, Bobbie is just having a bad day
Yeah,
or Karen's always a little moody,
right.
and just to
Don't
brush
mind
it off.
her.
But I think on another level, we're also as parents, if our child has a mental illness, especially something like depression, we almost see it as an indictment on our parenting skills.
Right.
And it's not.
No,
It's not at all.
right.
Uh, so I think that's the other thing is to not say, oh my gosh, surely my kid isn't depressed because,
I
and if they
couldn't have
are, does
caused
that
this.
mean what have we done wrong as
Right,
parents? What have I done wrong as a
right.
parent?
Well, I like that you bring up so often the teachers because when I was teaching sixth grade, and it's hard to be the one to approach. For one, and you worry about offending the parent and the family, but how much more important it is to think about the child and their success and helping them. And so I
Yeah.
think that's something so important to consider. I mean, yeah, with balance and
Yes,
and-
absolutely. And that the other reason I wanted to write this book is there are very few middle grade novels out there still about where the main character is experiencing depression.
right,
It's usually a parent or a grandparent or a sibling. You see tons of those in YA,
right.
but the fact of the matter is there are many, many, many thousands of kids under the age of 12 every year who are
Right.
diagnosed with chronic depression.
And I've read so many books, and mostly I listen to them, but about that is nonfiction. It's for the adult, how to help the child. And there are so many that are very, very helpful. And I listen to podcasts and things like that. But for me as the adult, this was even better. This was
Yeah,
even better to really put myself in the child's shoes and really think about it.
right.
And so it can be a tool also for adults to read and use
Absolutely.
and just
Absolutely.
kind of come at it from a different angle.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and yeah, I love it so much. So, what if Pearl was to give you some advice to send back in a letter, send it through time? What would Pearl advise you?
Well, that's a good question. And I think I dedicated the book to my 10-year-old self. And I think the whole book is a letter of compassion and hope to my 10-year-old self saying, look, you 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 are brave and you are strong and you are more than this illness, even though nobody wants to acknowledge that you have an illness. You are more than that, and you deserve to be heard, and you deserve to see a therapist or, whatever. You deserve that. And so that's why I dedicated the book to my 10-year-old self.
I think that's so beautiful. I love that so much. Can you tell us, you mentioned what you're working on now. Is there anything coming out soon or that is in the works?
I can't say a whole lot right now. I'm hoping I'll be able to in about a month, but my editor of Octopus Moon uh, has read a new book of mine called Run, and that's just kind of a placeholder title.
Right.
It is not in verse. It is not in verse.
Right, because your
And
agent's not allowed to submit anything that's in verse.
that's right. And she loves the book. So I'm hoping we're going to hear some good news this week. It's a companion book to an earlier book of mine called A Dog's Way Home, which is probably still one of my most popular books. But you don't have to have read A Dog's Way Home to to enjoy this one. But it takes place in Western North Carolina. So, living here again and being able to write a book in this setting, in this culture was really special for me. When I wrote A Dog's Way Home, it is also set in Western North Carolina, but I was living in Utah. So that's really great. So I hope I'll be able to say something exciting
All
in the
right.
next.
All right. Well, we'll have to keep an eye out because, and I will include in the description where people can find you and, your website and your socials so we can keep an eye out for this next hopeful book.
Yes, and then the one I'm working on now, my agent hasn't even seen, but as a writer and an artist, I like to stretch myself. And so this is fantasy, and I've never written fantasy before. And so I was pretty intimidated at first, but I'm having a lot of fun with it now. So it's great.
Oh, I love that you're dabbling there where you haven't been before. Fantasy's my jam, and that's what I love so much. And I would read it exclusively, but I tried so much when I was out seeking to do this YouTube channel and my podcast, sharing books, that I was like, I've got to branch out. I've got to branch out. And so that's one of the reasons I read Octopus Moon is I only read one novel in verse last year, and I was like, what? I got to get on it this year. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
yes.
Some of my favorite
Perfectly
authors
balanced.
of novels in verse are Jason Reynolds and Jacqueline
Yes.
Wilson. I mean, they're amazing,
Tell me the
amazing.
second name again.
Jacqueline Woodson.
Jacqueline. Oh, yes, yes. I'm familiar with her picture books. Yes.
Yeah, she writes picture books as well, but she writes Brown Girl Dreaming
Oh,
is
yes,
probably,
I've seen it. I'll need to read that.
yeah,
Okay.
she's amazing.
Well, while we're talking about other books, can you share with us a favorite children's book, either from when you were a kid or something that you just love now?
I think anything by Kate DiCamillo I will read. She
Yeah.
could write a grocery list and
And I
I
bet it
would
would be
I would
beautiful.
totally read it,
Right.
I mean, she's my girl. My favorite book of hers is Because of Winn-Dixie. It was her very first book, and it won a Newbery honor. I
Yeah.
mean, just oh my gosh. But I love the book. Obviously it's a dog book, which I love, but she just has such a way of creating these communities of characters that are so diverse but so compassionate. And reading her books, there's always a little tinge of melancholy. She
Right.
doesn't shy away
That's
from
right.
the tough things. She's always said her book mentor was Charlotte's Web
Oh,
and E.B. White.
yes.
And as we know, I mean, E.B. White did not shy away from tough subjects.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And I love the way you explained her writing, like the compassion of the characters, and then just, oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Doesn't shy away from. That's beautiful. I love talking to authors and hearing what they say about different works because it makes me think about works in a whole new way, and I like
Right.
approaching things
Right.
differently.
And you tend, when you're a writer, you tend to read differently,
Right.
uh, very differently.
Or
Just
like
like
when you
a
go back, when you talked
librarian.
about rereading that unicorn book, The Last Unicorn,
Yes.
that to
Yes.
experience it differently again.
But you've got to read that, by the
Yes,
way.
I never have. I've
Oh
heard
my
of it and
gosh.
been familiar with it, but yeah. So,
Yeah.
but I have I've read so many Kate DiCamillo's and I haven't read Because of Winn-Dixie yet. I
Oh, wow.
I've probably read most of hers and many to my children, and we've done two of them, one school, one book, and yeah, I've never read Because of Winn-Dixie, so I need to get on top of that.
Yeah. No, it's funny. It's endearing, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful book.
I know so many people love it for sure. Well, thank you so much, Bobbie, for taking the time to talk with us today. And thank you. I know that was so hard for you to write this book about a child with depression. Thank you for taking all of that time and heart and love into this.
Thank you, Karen. And if it just helps one kid who is struggling with a mental illness feel seen, and if it helps one kid who knows someone who struggles understand it a little bit more, then it's completely and totally worth it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed hearing about Octopus Moon by Bobbie Pyron. If you enjoy my podcast, BookHuddle, I would love for you to take a minute and rate and review it on your podcast platform. That will help more people find BookHuddle. Now go and have a fantastic week reading some amazing books.